Oh, hey there. It's been a minute. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Telemanca Review. And I think that I would like to get back to a little bit of podcasting here, if that's all right with you folks. Let me just check my levels here. I gotta make sure everything is working. Yeah, that's pretty much maximum, but I gotta spike that input level a little bit. Yeah. Let's see how that works. Okay. Yeah, that should be a bit better. All right, so I'm Bruce McDonald. This is the Talamanca Review, and it's been a minute. I got to get my legs back. Brief explanation. I've had more work pass through my hands in the last 6 weeks than I have in the last year, just in terms of stuff I need to get done to get paid. And I really had to concentrate. This is like the biggest client I've ever had. And so yeah, seems like a little bit of good luck for me to be, gainfully employed at a time where not everybody is. It's the kind of thing that you're grateful for, and I am grateful. So I've been on hiatus. I did a long fast as well, a couple weeks. And then I've just been trying to get my head around what's going on in the world now as I come back to podcasting, and it's really quite amazing. But one thing we're going to start with is where the title of today's show comes from, A Terrible Beauty. Here it is.
I have met them at the close of day, coming with vivid faces from counter or desk among grey 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head or polite, meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said polite, meaningless words, and thought before I had done of a mocking tale or a jibe to please a companion around the fire at the club, being certain that they and I but lived where motley is worn. All changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. That woman's days were spent in ignorant goodwill, her nights in argument until her voice grew shrill. What voice more sweet than hers when, young and beautiful, she rode to harriers? This man had kept us school and rode our winged horse. This other, his helper and friend, was coming into his force. He might have won fame in the end, so sensitive his nature seemed, so daring and sweet his thought. This other man I had dreamed a drunken, vainglorious lout. He had done most bitter wrong to some who were near my heart, yet I number him in the song. He too has resigned his part in the casual comedy. He too has been changed in his turn, transformed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. Hearts with one purpose alone through summer and winter seem enchanted to a stone to trouble the living stream. The horse that comes from the road, the rider, the birds that range from cloud to tumbling cloud, minute by minute they change. A shadow of cloud on the stream changes minute by minute. A horse hoof slides on the brim, and a horse plashes within it. The long-legged moorhens dive, and hens to moorcocks call. Minute by minute they live. The stones in the midst of all. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. Oh, when may it suffice? That is heaven's part. Our part to murmur name upon name, as a mother names her child when sleep at last has come on limbs that had run wild. What is it but nightfall? No, not night, but death. Was it needless death after all? For England may keep faith for all that is done and said. We know their dream, enough to know they dreamed and are dead. And what if excess of love bewildered them till they died? I write it out in a verse. MacDonagh and MacBride and Connolly and Pierce, now and in time to be, wherever green is worn, are changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born.
All right, that's a poem called Easter 1916 by William Butler Yeats. And it essentially commemorates the beginning of the Irish Revolution, which began when soldiers attacked a congregation of Irish civil rights activists and Irish sovereigntists who wanted Ireland free of England, which has often been a dream for both the Scots and the Irish. They've never really seen themselves as English, although they've been a part of the UK for some time now. That's just the way it is. Now, that began the 100-Year War, and I don't think that it's even over yet. I think the real IRA is still around, and I think that there's, still stuff going on there. So I like the turn of phrase that Yeats used, "a terrible beauty is born." I found that to be very moving. And just what a catchy phrase, right? I guess is how I would put it. And wow, 10 concurrent viewers. Holy spumoli, daytime broadcasting is even better. So what I'm going to try to do now is maybe connect some of the things I've written. Hi guys. Okay. So I think that what I'm going to try and do now is maybe connect some of the stuff I've written to the events that are going on now. So look, when you begin a chemical process, you can be fairly well sure of what the chemical reactions are going to be. So when you mix vinegar and baking soda, you know it's going to fizz, right? Everybody over 8 years old knows that. You mix baking soda and vinegar and it fizzes, or baking soda and lemon and it fizzes. It's a predictable chemical reaction. The way we're governed and the forces that govern us understand us at a level of psychology that is not in the public purview. Call it a metapsychology. Call it the understanding of the unconscious as understood by negative initiates of the secret societies. And they're not all negative. Nothing is uniform. Remember that. Nothing is uniform. I try to stress this, okay? It's not the Freemasons. It's not the Jews. It's not the deep state. It's not the Mossad. It's not the CIA. Everything is threaded. Okay? It's a very important thing to know and to understand at this moment in history, so nobody does anything stupid. which I don't think will be a feat that will be easy to escape or overcome, not being stupid, because I don't know, I see a lot of stupid in the West now. It's just stupid everywhere I look. So if I'm right, and all the modesty aside, I'm right in my general thesis in The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me, we are now at the point in their process where the anticipated reaction is coming about, like the vinegar and the baking soda. Okay? So now all of the immigration, all of the things that are becoming manifestly clear that they're trying to do to the West now, with the complicity of our leaders. Now, who is behind all of this? Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I'm going to try my best, and I'm going to try not to be evasive. Change is inevitable at this point. At the cycle we're growing now, as a human race, and I mean literally growing in terms of population, food management, work management, all of these sorts of things. The systems that were put into process as early as 1776 had a specific design behind them. And the design was to develop and harvest the resource and wealth of the American continent for the European masters. Which is why we were given a new model of doing things. Okay, we were given a model that was completely different than anybody else had been given. Saw that, my volume spiking into the red there. So we were given a free rein or a free charter. Right? Like the Ohio land grab is one example, okay? If you don't understand what that is, go watch a movie called Far and Away with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. And it talks about, he's an Irish dude, and Tom Cruise plays an Irish dude, and comes over to America, and there's a big land grab. You get out there and you spike a flag and you claim your land, but it was dangerous and it was lawless. But the European powers and their American cohorts, and I don't think the American Revolution survived. I don't think it survived. It may have survived maybe like 100 years. And that's about it. I mean, they managed to drag us into World War I and World War II. Right? There's amazing stories behind all that. You can go and research it. What were the forces that got us into World War I and World War II? Because remember, those were European wars, and we weren't European anymore. Canadians, Americans, Mexicans. I mean, you're not going to find anybody in Latin America who's going to go over to Spain and fight for the Spaniards. Fucking ridiculous. Right? So we were given a way of doing things over here that was different. There were certain rewards or perks for being a Canadian or a North American. You could achieve as a regular fellow without excessive talent, just the desire to work and your own creativity. The average American and Canadian from the 60s right up until the 2000s could live a life undreamed of by most of the world, including Brits, Parisians. They're not rich. Don't look at those countries and think they're rich the way we were rich. They weren't. The average Brit will never own a clothes dryer. You go to their house, if it's laundry day, you'll see the laundry hanging on these wooden stands. We call them clothing horses. That's what my mum used to call them. I think that's their official name. And they're drying their clothes in their living room beside the radiator There's no dryers. Very few Brits own their own home. It's a country where you rent your whole life, unless you come from an estate or you have a family farm, but even them, they're losing a lot of that now too. The French, they have their apartments, they have their fancy clothes and their nice coffee and everything, but they're not rich. We were the rich people. And it was done for a reason. It was done to develop this continent. The continent is developed now. And the landlords seem to have another plan for it. Okay, now everybody's waking up to this now. This is no longer something that they can call the far right. So we're at that point in the devil in us where the chemical reaction is taking place. What do you do? How do we survive this? How do we get through this? Not react, not become violent, not increase our karmic footprint, not sin. If you're a Christian, you don't want to sin. Right? How do you get through this? How do we fight a plan that's been in place for 144 years with the express design of destroying our cultures? And there can be no denying it now. No denying it, okay? I'm going to play a couple things now. I've got a lot of material for today's show. I'm back into the podcasting game, folks. Bruce is back. I'm back. I'm going to do a daily podcast now. Well, Chris France has a washer and dryer. Do you share that amongst the whole house, Chris? So you live in a rented flat, and the landlord provides a washer and a dryer for the 5, 6, or 7 people living in this house. Yeah, it's because he's white. All right, so let's start with a little Jolly Heretic, okay? And we'll start with the reasoned approach. This is a guy, a friend of mine, Neil, turned me on to this guy, and he does great short videos. They call him the Jolly Heretic. I warn you beforehand, he wears an ascot, which I don't think is a good look for any self-respecting man, but here we go.
I was reading the other day that the level of trust in the media in ex-communist countries is extremely low. And the proposed reason for this is that they have been through communism, and they therefore know what it is like, particularly towards the end of communism, to have absolutely no trust in the media, and no trust in the police, and no trust in any of the institutions of the state, because they're all lying, or they're almost all lying, all the time, and you have to read between the lines to know what's going on. And also, of course, the law in such society is not enforced fairly. The law is enforced differently if you are a senior member of the party compared to if you are an ordinary person. So there is a great deal of corruption and therefore no trust in the system. We are increasingly seeing this in the UK. And I wonder if what is happening in the UK as I make this video, i.e. the protests and disorder that was set off as a consequence of a Rwandan immigrant boy killing 3 little girls, I wonder if this is a turning point in which that trust is gone. And before I look at that, I would ask you, could you possibly subscribe? If you like what I do, could you subscribe here on YouTube and also on my Substack, The Jolly Heretic, where if you like what I do, you can support me for the cost of a pint of beer a month. Okay, back to the video. Now, why do I say this? Well, it is perfectly clear that we now do not trust the police and we do not trust the media. And once that trust is gone, and I suspect that what is happening, these riots are a demonstration that it is gone, then it is extremely hard to ever get it back. If we look at the police, I suspect we used to trust the police, but in about the year 2000, Tony Blair politicised the police. There was the Stephen Lawrence inquiry into the murder of a black teenager, Stephen Lawrence, with the consequence that the racism was used basically to remove the old guard that had traditional values and bring in left-wing proto-woke people, and in particular women, to start running the police force. And naturally such people are uber conformist, and so they will and are obsessed with power and Machiavellian, so they take hold in a kind of Gramscian march to the institutions of the police force and turn it into something woke. And then of course we see very quickly the development of two-tier policing. If you want to go around on a Palestine march, stir.
There you go. He's testifying, ladies and gentlemen, telling you like it is, okay? All of this woke shit. Now remember, it's like trying to see the hands of a clock move, right? It's very difficult. This is why they do it the way they do it, because they know we're stupid and easily distracted. This is why you've got the Showtime, the HBO, the Netflix, the Hulu, the Peacock, the HBO Max. This is why it's all out there. Stay distracted, okay? So this is the big push. This is the chemical reaction. So there's a lot of things that have gone into making this. Let's get back to this.
Up hatred and using terrorist symbols, that's fine. If you want to go on a march to do with Britishness and have a Union Jack, then the police can arrest you. If you want to go out and do a protest about 3 little girls being murdered by an immigrant, you expect to be arrested, expect to be beaten up. But if you want to go out and just stop oil because you are, of course, pro-Labour, and disrupt everything and disrupt people's lives, that's absolutely acceptable. You just get a slap on the wrist. If you want to commit actual crime, then you get a short sentence, if any sentence at all, and the Labour Party are emptying the prisons. But if you engage in protest, which in some way is seen to threaten them, to threaten their power, to be an expression that other groups in the society have power and don't like what's happening and don't like the way things are run, then suddenly they're talking about 24-hour courts. Suddenly they're talking about you going to prison and heavy sentences and whatever. Hang on a minute, I thought there was no room in the prisons. But they like having actual criminals on the street, because that's anarcho-tyranny. It means that people are so frightened and so trying to defend themselves and so forth that they don't have time to politically organise.
Yeah, he's telling the truth there. He's just nailing it, okay? So they're doing this to scare us, to make it look like we don't have any protection. This is what, for those of you who read The Light of Darkness, there were a lot of people who found the ending very mysterious. I will tell you briefly what the ending is. I finish with a chapter about a town in Mexico that used to have at least 1 murder and 1 rape a day. It was run by narco-traffickers. There was a large indigenous population. I think it was called Chiapas, the town. They took over the town, fired the mayor and fired the police, and from the time they took over the town, from that day, there was no murder and no rape. And they chased the narco-traffickers out. What happened? Well, a higher level of government came in. This isn't in the book. It was still functioning under native rule when I wrote the book 5 years ago. But eventually the Mexican federal authorities came in and reinstated civil government in the municipality by force, taking the town back from the natives, returning it to the narcos, the chaos, the murder, and the rape. Okay? So everybody is getting a different version of the same thing. Okay? So the negative elements in societies that were perceived to be free are being enhanced. Okay? And they're enhanced because they provide revenue stream for the corrupt. And in the case of the first world, because they're going to wash their hands of our death by getting these negative forces in our societies to do the killing. All right, let's get back to this.
Let them run amok. But if you actually are doing something which is challenging the regime and showing up the regime to be hypocritical and so forth, well, then suddenly they find the money and they find the prison places and they find the resources to deal with you. If you are a Muslim and you break the nose of a female police officer, then this is apparently acceptable, and I believe no arrests have been made. The policeman that tries to defend you defend his colleague is pilloried in the press and made out to be Islamophobic and racist and whatever. And the lies get round the world before the truth can even brush its teeth. If you are a foreigner in Leeds, it's okay for you to riot, and all that happens is your child is returned. A term of abuse, this shut-up word, far right. A term of abuse, this shut-up word, far right, simply because you are protesting about an immigrant killing 3 little girls. This shows you that you are not sufficiently on board with mass immigration, ergo you are evil, ergo you are far right, and you can be smeared and attacked. And on and on and on we go. The media have made nothing. They've hardly reported the fact that in Manchester, massive prison sentences were handed out to 20.
So, again, I use my books as a reference because they're going to become more and more relevant, okay? And that's just the way it is. I'm not being immodest. I'm not being egotistical. It's just that what I wrote in those books, Light of Darkness and The Devil in Us, was 100% accurate. And while all these new age flakes were out there saying we're going to 5D and everything, they failed to tell people about the football field of broken glass we're going to have to crawl over on our hands and knees to get there. Okay? There's no gimmies in life. There's no miracles. Okay? I mean, occasionally you'll get a miracle in your life. I've had miracles in my life. For me only. You know, the only person who's seen them operating in my life are my son. Sometimes the people closest to you and in a karmic relationship with you can see that stuff where other people can't. But yeah, miracles happen, but don't expect them. Okay? In my experience, miracles happen to advance your consciousness in your relationship with God, not to transform the timeline in a beneficial way for you materially or emotionally. This is not our reality. We are co-participants in this reality. Okay? All right, let's get back to Buddy Boy here, find out.
28 men who had raped this woman and trafficked her since she was a teenager, but this is hardly discussed. But yet if anyone makes a mean tweet about Islam or whatever it happens to be, it's all over the newspapers. So we have a 2-tier policing system, clearly, in which the clients of the state, the group from which the state gains its moral authority by saying that they are virtuous, by saying that they are concerned with equality and harm avoidance, and therefore they're in favour of Muslims, or they're in favour of foreigners, or whatever it happens to be, and therefore they vote for them. That group is policed clearly more softly than an ordinary white person. And this is evidenced by the furious reaction to the Hampshire Police Commissioner Donna Jones, who said correctly that the protesters are concerned about a 2-tier policing system. And you had all these MPs demanding that she be thrown out of the Conservative Party, or demanding that this be taken down. In the end, it was taken down. Why? Because it triggered them. Why? Because she was clearly telling the truth. And also there was concern that by telling the truth about the 2-tier policing, this would inflame rioters further. But the point is, it is the truth. So we have 2-tier policing, and there is no reason to trust the police, and we don't trust the police. They have lost their authority. And this happens towards the end. The second thing that happens towards the end...
Well, that's a powerful statement. The police have lost their authority. I think it's the same thing in Canada. I think it's the same thing in Australia. And I think it's the same thing in the United Kingdom. The question then becomes, how do you take people who've been so mentally conditioned? And believe me when I tell you, we are the most mentally conditioned people on the planet. North Americans. Okay? Canadians even more so than Americans. Okay? I can spot a Canadian over here from 100 meters away just by the way they walk and look around stupidly. I'm not even joking, okay? It's that facile for me. We have been heavily programmed. How do we come out of the programming? How do we get through this initiatic process? Because this is an initiatic process. Remember, all initiations are traumatic. There's no peaceful initiation. Even Christian baptism, they dunk you under the water. That's slightly traumatic. Okay? Not traumatic like PTSD from war or something like that, but it is a shocking thing to be dunked underwater. And that's just the mildest example of a pseudo-initiation. A real initiation is a process you go through in your timeline. It can be ordered and structured. The secret societies do them by stimulating psychic centers. Spiritual masters awaken you at the crown. Okay, they awaken you at the head level, the third eye and the crown. Psychic teachers will maybe transfer some energy to one of your chakras and get it going into hyperdrive. Okay, so you'll get whatever you're going to get, some form of cognitive enhancement that's associated with that chakra. Okay, but I don't recommend this. It produces extremely imbalanced people. Okay, so we're on the verge of it now. So can you see that 5D coming into focus? Is there a little threshold you got to step over, and it's all sunshine and rainbows and labradoodles in a park chasing sticks? Can you see that reality where everybody is in harmony? No, you don't see it, do you? Because the whole 5D thing was a bunch of fucking nonsense. That may be where we're getting to when we go through this initiatic process, but very few people spoke about the initiatic process, which is what we're in now. Let's get back to the Jolly Heretic.
This complete loss of faith in the media. I suspect that COVID is a big part of this. We know we were lied to like anything by the media during COVID. We know that people were thrown off social media and so forth for saying things which have since turned out to be correct. And there has been no redress, there has been no apology for the unbelievable repression and lies during that period. And I think that has made a lot of people lose trust in the media. But then look at the way the media are reporting this murder of 3 little girls. The killer, who has been named, has pictures of him when he was a young, sweet little choir boy. As if they're trying to make people think that he was nice and it's not his fault. Rather than pictures of him as the horrible, degenerate, violent man that he no doubt is now. Pictures of him as a little, sweet, angelic choir boy or dressed up as Doctor Who. Constantly, they talk about the protesters as far right, which is an emotive, insulting term. It's one of those terms that is created, it has indefinite boundaries like racist or Nazi or whatever, or indefinite boundaries, so that anything that deviates at all from orthodoxy can be captured by it, and therefore you can be reproved by the term with the hope, therefore, that you won't deviate from orthodoxy because you won't want to be placed into that term with its connotations of evil. They are the far right, but yet the counter-protesters, and isn't it fascinating that Hope Not Hate and such groups turn up to counter-protest people protesting about the murder of 3 little girls? They are anti-racism protesters or anti-fascist protesters. So they are what they say they are, but yet the people that would say they are pro-British protesters or anti-child murder protesters, they are far right. So this shows you that the left-wing bias of the media, and therefore the media are lying, and therefore at least the mainstream media are not to be trusted. If they use that term, far right, about these protesters, what they're...
Critical point there, folks. He's laying it all down here, the Jolly Heretic, ascot and all, okay? I gotta give the guy his points, man. It's time to speak up. Look, there's nothing they can call us anymore that matters. Far right, okay. Anti-Semite, okay. Who cares? But don't say anything hateful and do everything you do with love. Everything with love. Even when you fight, that's the whole point of William Butler Yeats, A Terrible Beauty is Born. The beauty is the drive for freedom, to be human and free and to be living in an organic culture. That's what Yeats was referring to as beauty. He defined it as a terrible beauty because to realize it would involve tremendous sacrifice, suffering, horror, and violence. So there you go. Let's finish up with the Jolly Heretic here.
Clearly working class people. They are working class people who are protesting. And it's very telling that they call them far right because they don't like them. They see them as disgusting. They see them as beneath them. They see them as not worth, they're not worth their time, as horrible. They see everything they don't like about Britain, they see in those people. They project, indeed, their insecurities onto those people. They don't like them. They don't think they should have a voice. They think they are degenerate, and therefore they term them far right. And eventually, of course, then you don't trust the media either. And so the media will say, oh, there was misinformation stating that this person was an immigrant or stating that this person was a Muslim. Well, why should we believe them? I mean, it gets to a point where why should we believe what they're saying is right, when we know they have lied? And I hope we reach a turning point now where the immediate reaction should be to assume that the media are not telling the truth about this issue. And they almost certainly are not. There's almost certainly things that are not being reported. in the same way that they wouldn't report the details of the gang rape with the 28 Muslim men because the details were considered too gruesome to report. Well, I wonder what's not being reported here. But this kind of thing, when trust like this is lost, it happens towards the end of a regime. So it may well be that things are shifting and that the English have finally awoken. As the poem has it by Rudyard Kipling, it was not suddenly bred, it will not swiftly abate, through the chilled years ahead, when time shall count from the date that the Saxon began to hate. Are you ready for the...
They always tell me that the problem is high taxes, but they're wrong. Of course, high taxes are extremely high here in the United States, I give you that. The real problem is not the high taxes themselves, but the fact that they are not even really funding the government. Not even those high taxes, higher than a lot of places in the world, not even those taxes are really funding the government. So who's financing the government? Government is financed by treasury bonds. And who buys the treasury bonds? Mostly the Fed. And how does the Fed buy them? By printing money. But what backing does the Fed have for that money being printed? The treasury bonds themselves. So basically, you finance the government by printing money out of thin air. Well, so if the government can print the limited amounts of money out of thin air, why do they collect taxes? The answer is simple, but it's very shocking. The real problem is that you pay high taxes only to uphold the illusion that you are funding the government, which you are not. It's shocking, but it's true. The government is funded by money printing, paper backed with paper, a bubble that will inevitably burst. The situation is even worse than it seems, because if most Americans and the rest of the world were to become aware of this farce, confidence in your currency would be lost, the dollar would fall, and the Western civilization with it. If the next president of the United States doesn't make the necessary policies and structural changes, sooner or later that bubble will burst. There's still time. You don't have to make the same mistakes we did in the 60s and the 70s. You can still jump before the water boils. Winning the election isn't enough to solve these problems. They will not simply go away as a consequence of an electoral result. It will take a total re-engineering of the government top to bottom. It will entail making difficult decisions. It will be hard. The system will push back, but you have the right to determine your own fate.
Powerful stuff there, powerful stuff. Hold on a sec. Now I need to understand why my video capture device is frozen. Not easy getting back to the podcasting here. Let's try the iPhone camera again. There we go. All right. It just froze up on me there for a sec. I had to switch to USB and then switch back. So, yeah, the Jolly Heretic nailed it. Now, the thing that we have to remember is that we don't really have a visible enemy. And the enemy that we're being directed towards is part of the anticipated chemical reaction of the social chemists who've been percolating us for 144 years. So on the one hand, I look at these situations and I go, well, how could it be any different? If the British government, and in large measure the American government, is following suit, and in large measure the Canadian government is following suit, and certainly, without doubt, the New Zealand and Australian governments are following suit, which means that they're redacting police protection from average citizens, creating an unsafe living environment. Now, that's what you do in a pre-negotiation. Okay, so they're getting us into a mindset to make an offer to us, those of us who survive all of the depopulation machinations that are going on, and those are still going on. Near as I can tell, they've got another one lined up, the bird flu. So, you know, this is war. It's a different kind of war. But we're in a war now. People say, when is World War III going to start? It started. It's, in many instances, the form of the war is government against its own people. This is why it's so hard to understand as a war. But by any reasonable measure, the Jolly Heretics, mine, yours, our governments are in a state of criminality and treason now. And that's not a word I invoke lightly. It's usually associated with some semi-literate, dentally challenged moron living in a backwater of the United States. Okay? But in this instance, it's actually literally true. Okay? Now, these problems, as Bukele points out, they're easy to change. So what am I going to do to help you? Okay? How can I help you get through these difficult times? If I'm to have any value to you as a friend and a podcaster, any comfort to you as a voice of light and reason, then I have to provide some kind of a context in which you can maybe find a little bit of security, give you a little bit of the architecture of a plan that would get us out of this. Okay? Well, the reason I played the Bukele tape is because it's going to begin with money. Okay? Because the system is so entrenched now that if they go off the money system, the only thing that can possibly replace it is a tyrannical authoritarian regime. And the reason that's the only thing that could contain it at this point is the chemical reactions of consciousness. Ergo, the expectations. Remember what the Buddhists say, desire is the source of all suffering? Think of the expectations that have been put into Westerners, and then you will begin to understand the level of despair and depression that Gen Z lives with. Because there's no future for them here. There's no life like their grandparents or their parents had. Some of them, if they get lucky, find some crypto scam or develop an app and make a little bit of money. But those are lottery ticket outcomes. They're not normative. So this is what is going on. So the expectations of the Westerners are the highest in the world. Our expectation of justice, harmony, equality. Look, all of this progressiveness came out of an affluent society. It's not quite as attractive when it's practiced or uttered or talked about by people living in a non-affluent society. You don't see a lot of transgender issues in African villages. It just doesn't happen. They're busy building their cob roundhouses with grass roofs and hunting for their food and planting their corn and their yucca. Not a lot of time for gender issues over there. These are issues that come about in affluent societies. So one of the weapons that the enemy is using against us is our own affluence, our own ability or the perception of comfort that we can think about things that are not related to survival. Do you know how many people on this planet are even given that opportunity to think about something other than survival? Not very many. You don't find it too many places in the world. Where I live here, people are thinking in a 24-hour economy. Maybe a week if they have steady work. They have a project they're working on. But they live in a very tight economy. Okay, so they're living in a constant state of survival. And that produces a certain state of mind. And that state of mind has limitations. Okay? We were given freedom to think about things other than survival. I want you to think about that really carefully because that's an important point, okay? We were given something. Nobody else was given. What did we do with it? How did we make the world a better place? What did we do with our wealth? Well, one thing I just finished doing was rewatching all of the Narcos series. When I'm fasting, I watch a bit of TV because you don't have a lot of energy, right? So I watched Narco 1, 2, and 3, the Pablo Escobar story. That's late 80s, early 90s. Then season 3 is the Cali cartel, how they got taken down. And then there's 3 seasons of Narcos Mexico, which begins with the Sinsemilla marijuana revolution, marijuana that was produced without seeds and made billionaires in Mexico who ultimately developed such efficient smuggling routes that the cocaine dealers came to them. But that entire economy and the transformation of Colombia and Mexico was directly related to the disposable income of Americans and Canadians. Think about that. When you think about your own existence in this world, think about everything you do and how it affects everything. If you've ever bought a gram of cocaine, you probably have a little murder karma on you. And I'm not trying to be shocking. I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm telling you the truth. There is so much violence attending that cocaine trade that if you use that drug recreationally, even 5-10 times a year, you are probably somehow directly related by 6 degrees of separation to at least one murder. Accessory to murder. And we did that with our disposable income. We wanted party drugs. Look at the party drug market. Any drug that's going to make it in the world has to make it in the United States. That's what we did with our middle class. That's what we did with our relaxation and our ability to breathe. Now, we did good stuff too. Some people went into the Peace Corps, dug wells in Africa, Middle East, Latin America. Not many, but some. Gave a lot of aid money away. And that's no lie. You know, people shit on North America all the time because of its regime change policies, American military establishment and everything. And it's all true, and I don't agree with those things, but I don't allow myself to forget how much good we've done as well. Because we've given more money for genuine emergency relief to more countries than any nation in the history of nations. Canada and the United States per capita, each country. Okay, so don't let them tell you we're this bad, evil thing. This is the chemical reaction now. They want to It's not so much us they hate. Don't make it a racial issue. It's not a racial issue per se. It is because it's easier for them to organize us and attack us through racial issues. But it's not a racial issue. The issue is the consciousness of freedom and the entitlement to be a human being. That's what the middle class created. And those expectations are very difficult to take away. Very, very difficult to take away. But they're slowly weaning them from us. They don't want our children to have them. We're up against pivotal forces here. So this is the Team Dark's version of the 5D. And by the way, everything you see going on in the world is a good thing. It means that the magical system that was governing beforehand is gone, and everything is becoming physical and manifest now. And they have to get rid of, or they have to change their system and make it more physical and visceral because things changed on the astral. That's where which means they're going to change here, as above, so below. Right? That's what the maxim believes. That's what the maxim is, actually, as above, so below. So it's not really above, per se, but in time it's before. So the astral is before the physical manifestation. Slightly before. Yeah. Slightly before. So the chemical reaction now is meant to create domestic chaos. And our goal now is to attempt to communicate to people who would be our enemies. Okay? Now, in the case of Britain, it's a tough situation. Now, I don't usually say racist stuff, but I'm going to be a little bit racist today, okay? Because race is a real thing. We're a genetic thing. We are genetic beings. Okay? We breed. We have bloodlines. How that breeding is done is important. Okay? The situation in England is a tough one. And it's tough because they're dealing with Pakistanis. Nobody, and I mean nobody, likes Pakistanis. The Turks I danced with for a year in the Sufi Durga, they don't like Pakistanis. And I asked about it. The Sheikh told me Pakistanis are very susceptible to possession, demonic possession. And they're very weak people oracally, meaning things walk in and out of them all the time. Now, how do you get that weak oracally? Well, inbreeding. I mean, the Pakistani population is about 95% inbred. Okay, I mean, these are unpleasant things to talk about, and this is part of the conditioning we've gone through, is don't talk about these things. Can't talk about race, Bruce. Why not? Why not, if it's statistically valid? Empirically correct? Pakistanis are a psychotic people. They're not liked in Saudi Arabia. Not many of them even make the pilgrimage to Mecca. And if they do get there, they're treated like shit on the street. Nobody likes Pakistanis. Nobody. Begging the question, why would Britain be bringing in all these Pakistanis? I mean, what were they hoping to accomplish by bringing in this criminal-laden, violence-laden, demon-laden, genetic fuck-up of a race? They're all marrying their first cousins. Okay? That's a big issue in the Ashkenazi community as well. That's why they're so psychotic, by the way. And their situation is a little bit more tragic because through various forms of anti-Semitism and European pogroms in Eastern Europe, they were reduced to the point where breeding options were limited. So to survive, they bred with first cousins. But now they're all inbred now, the Ashkenazis. So nature has these penalties built right into it, right? Don't mate with your family. You know, do not mate with your family. At a certain point, these genetic lines, they sort of wear out. You got to go look for something else. Right? All right, let's take a look at Tommy. Let's take a look at the angry version of the Jolly Heretic. And remember everything you've learned on the Talamanca Review. Remember the people that are running us now. They're people like Macron and Biden. And Biden is really Obama. I think Obama's been running the show. I think Biden is his third term and Cammie's his fourth, if she gets in. The probability of that is slim to none. Right? So they're going full woke now. That's what they're doing. They're going full woke. So they're going to do this whole gender race thing as the counter story to Trump, but I don't think people are buying it, man. I'm listening to Latinos and blacks on X. They're not buying it this time around, man. So, anyways, let's listen to a little Tommy.
Take our country back. Tommy.
Alex, on the 27th of July, we mobilised 100,000 patriots, the largest gathering of patriots Britain has ever seen. That must have put the fear of God into them. It must have terrified them. So then we had the incident where the 3 young girls were brutally murdered and many others stabbed and are still fighting for their life. There was then a demonstration that evening. Now, that evening had nothing to do with me. It was locals on an estate who come out angry and clashed with the police. Now, that evening, the government and the police put out claiming it was the English Defence League. Now, Alex, I led the English Defence League. I founded it. It has not existed for a decade. So very early on, they were building up the Fall Guy. Then, all over the news, our lead politicians are talking about prescribing an organisation that doesn't even exist as a terrorist organisation. Yeah. So every single bit of disorder that has gone on in the last 3, 4, 5 days, there's another hotel on fire now as we speak in a town called Tamworth. So these disorders are breaking up in towns and cities across the UK. They're organised by people in those towns and cities, and these people are angry and they're fighting, yeah, and they're fighting the authorities. Now, it's not the English Defence League. Why have they blamed the English Defence League? Because they want to create this bogeyman rather than say the British public are pissed. They're pissed in every town and city. They're angry up and down this country for failures to listen to them. And then when they try to have a voice, When they actually take to the street peacefully, as we did on the 27th of July, they still attack you with the media as far right, as extremists. But our momentum as a cultural movement that we were building, Alex, we started on the 1st of June with 30,000. We then went to the 27th of July with 100,000. Our momentum on social media, which is what this is about. If you listen to Keir Starmer's address to the nation there, he doesn't talk about locking up the people who have committed criminality. He's coming for all of you. That's what he says, okay? And he implies, I believe, and many others believe, he's talking to me. And we're going to get locked up as well, okay? So they've tried, all the media are saying that I've stoked, even though I'm very grateful that we have X. Because you see, if we didn't have X, I put out a video this morning, it's a 3-minute video addressing the government that this is not.
All right, that's enough, Tommy. Tommy's an angry white man. He's fighting the good fight over there. There's a lot of people who were and another thing I forgot to mention this podcast, and I will mention it. When you're surveying the landscape, always be aware of what Graham Greene called The Third Man, made into a brilliant film by Orson Welles, but it's based on a Graham Greene novel. For those of you who don't know, Graham Greene was a British novelist in the 20th century. He wrote some outstanding books. He was considered like a kind of British Hemingway, if you will. Very similar and austere writing style. Quite beautiful, his writing. And he wrote this book called The Third Man. And it's about how when you're looking at a two-party situation, also be looking for the third parties, the ancillary parties, exacerbating the situation or incentivizing one side for their own benefit, their own end. But this is a very grim circumstance we face in the West now, okay? And as I said earlier, you'll know things are changing for real when somebody begins to talk about money. When this totally breaks the Trudeau-Poilievre paradigm in Canada and the Biden or the Harris and Trump narrative in the United States. These are all nonsensical narratives. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong. I think you're going to do a better job for yourself voting for Donald J. Trump than you will for Joe Biden. Joe Biden has shown us what his plans are. His plans are the same as the UK, to destroy white Christian society in the United States. Okay? And let's be honest, it's not just a white thing anymore. It's black people too. They've picked up to it in Chicago. They know 700,000. Do you know how many Venezuelans are in the United States right now? And the United States government is incentivizing a revolution in Venezuela with probably 2 or 3 million military age, single, bank card holding, UN bank card holding Venezuelans in the United States. Okay, these liberal policies are a lie, but it doesn't mean that the liberals are lying. The people who believe them. Threading through these circumstances takes a nearly limitless supply of compassion and understanding. And I know that's counterintuitive to what our emotions are when we see these things, like the 3 British girls murdered by a Rwandan immigrant. Okay, I know they're counterintuitive, but this is the test. This is the initiation. And they're all the same. They're about how do you express your internal reality and not be overwhelmed by the external circumstances when we get into what we'll call random, chaotic patterns. Okay? And that's what we're going into now, random chaos. And it'll be indiscriminate in many ways. It'll be very difficult to get a handle on taking care of yourself in this circumstance. Very difficult indeed. Not going to be easy. Money is the key. When you see somebody step up to the podium and they start talking about a commodity-based paper currency. Now, gold and silver aren't going to cut it anymore. This is what people are not getting. See, this market does work. The failure in the market is the misconceptions in the people. But the market itself works. The reason it's out of balance now is the people who liquidate the market, the money makers, have done so on purpose. Now, isn't it interesting? And I mean, in the case of the United States, and this will certainly be the case, I'm not going to lie to you about this. If Trump gets in, you're going to be following a very Jerusalem-centric agenda. Okay? But that's a false light as well. What does it save you from? Remember, you got the two options. You got the gulag or the synagogue. It's Noahide law or it's violent communist takeover. Both Jewish ideologies, Karl Marx and the Talmudists. Talmudists they want the Noahide law, and the secular intellectual Jews, the psychotic murdering Jews, they want the communism. And there's Jews in the middle, victimized by all of this, just trying to live their life, their religion, and the lives of their ancestors according to the Torah. And that should be respected too. It's an incredibly difficult situation to walk through. And that's why not everybody's going to make it. And that's why you can retake initiation, you can retest for an initiation, but this is a huge initiation. So how are you going to get to this clearer consciousness, this spiritual lucidity, what the New Age freaks call 5D? Because they have to invent language, because the Abrahamic language is so powerful, they have to compete. You ever wonder why they make up all this shit, this Dolores Cannon? You practically need a Dolores Cannon dictionary to listen to Dolores Cannon. She invented so many fucking terms. Why do they do that? Something wrong with God, Holy Spirit, soul, reincarnation? Something wrong with those words? They don't cut it anymore? No, because these New Age fruitcakes have been as much a distraction to what's going on in this. And many of them are an agency to the Satanists, whether they realize it or not. Okay? Many of them are operating as, let's call them freelance agents of the satanic system. And they may be doing it in a kind of equitable rationalization. I say, well, the world is this negative, therefore I have to behave this negatively to survive. Equitable rationalization. New Agers love that shit. They just love it. Equitable rationalization. But this is the real process we're going through now, and it's a terrible beauty. There's no fucking 5D gonna float into your consciousness. I'm living 5D. The fuck is... How was that ever gonna work? Huh? How was that ever gonna work? And now we got to live through all the religious nonsense because we're going to vote Trump in, and that brings the religious nonsense in. These prophecies are being manufactured by groups of men, wizards, and magicians. Not by spiritual people, not by the will of God. It's a plan. A plan being executed by very efficient and super smart beings, not all of them human. Because they want to maintain the illusion of control over your consciousness. Because if they can control what you think and believe, then they control you. And the trauma we're going through now, and it will be traumatic. I'm not going to escape it up here. How can I escape a depression in North America where I live? I can't escape it. I'll be planting potatoes and onions and tomatoes. Trying to live on $500-600 a month, which is very doable up here. It's going to get hairy now, folks. You see? And we haven't even gotten to the real game yet. We're still playing all the bullshit illusion games. Trump, Harris. You know? Immigrant nationalist. These are all the false binaries. Okay? When they start talking about money, an equitable system of money, you'll know the process. And it takes root, meaning that it becomes so prevalent in public discourse that nobody can take the stage without talking about it. And I'm not talking about cryptocurrency here. Cryptocurrency is just another bullshit way to kick the can down the road, try and keep this bullshit system alive a little bit longer. I mean, what liability does a government have when it allows the private creation of money? And that's what Bitcoin is. It's the private creation of money. So private creation of money means that there's no real policing behind that money. It's not crypto. It's going to be a commodities-based currency that allows for fair trade amongst all nations. That's what it's going to be, and you'll begin to hear people starting to talk about it in the near future. I'm not psychic. This is just common sense. Remember those chemical reactions I told you about? I study them pretty closely too. Commodities-backed currency. Government-controlled money. Government-controlled money. If the government took over the banking system and just ran the banking system, and a charter was created where people always had access to banking, irregardless of their civil or criminal relationship with the state, that those fundamental liberties could never be taken away, your right to bank and your right to access your property in the form of money. And it is your property. All of these bullshit laws have to be taken away, like the Great Taking, which I covered when I was doing McDonald in the Morning. That's going to have to go away as well. People are going to have a real sense of equitable partnership in the world. This basic income is not going to, UBI, Universal Basic Income, is not going to work. That'll rob us of all our spirit. You see, because surviving down here is part of the spiritual growth process. God doesn't make mistakes. This life is meant to be this hard. And if you live it and you live it honestly with morality, well, you get dividends. That's the only way I can tell you, is you get dividends. All right, well, we're in it now, man. And we'll be back tomorrow with another podcast. If anybody wanted to call in, you could do so now briefly. I will hold out for 5 seconds. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. All right, so this has been a terrible beauty. And now you know where that expression comes from, William Butler Yeats. And we'll be back tomorrow with some fresh content. Thanks for watching.